가장 신인 계속 대신도 서로 있는 이 공유선 겁니다. 뭐야? 요성산제당 예정으로가 지금 전주 차가 가는 동안 집에 다니 방과가 마땅히 셰프되면 또 그만 매발하고 그 같이 먹고 그렇게 되고 차차로 계속 좀 신경을 넣고 저런 공주는 된다야 주 그다음에 레카바라 저바 담비지도 다니 따른 게 지som라 만나나 그저 최대로 공권이 와서 예서로 신호들 두제는 것도 담제 같이 취지자 보라 저 사람 진비시가 굉장히 되니까 그거가 두제 빨리 사람 특징된 바산데 바른데 김멜링 바라 저 길에서 원기년 소송배 동반하고 다른 거 강압받는데 바깥이가 김멜 제르뉴 거라 그저 저다 제베스 보시와나 나다 특히 공소샤와 싸움 방교 동아라는 김멜 추저원 보라 그저 축진데 바로는 것이 여러 못 받아 되어서 여러 똑같이 문제로 와서 림비니 말아 그저 삼주기 공원을 말아 그거 주도 담아놓게 예명아 그원 소로한테 투기 예명제 벌신기로 가다 주니고 뭐도 저런 하기 예시 타로지 내가 돈이 좀 어제 지금 시작을 그저 내가 보고 벌신기로 엠바용도 군전집이 용맹하니 고치기 상제주 남정으로 통치다는 변비차 미안한 포가기 살라고 비도한다 매대 종 총매람이 가동만을 봐 라고 지르긴 예전다 시지 하동람이 다주신겨 하동람이 다주신겨로 하동람이 다주신기로 강주선 조란지들라니면 다르던 합진업계다 내가 노래 뭐지면 말씀드려서 원이 배도나 방에다 가져라네 빠져라 두가비를 간다 바탕이 나 참게 타바 삼배 거기 특히 소년 전한데 시시 강다 휴지 공근지 되나 대신 공원지 바꿔 내가 또 비추제 전법제 셈바른도 바탕 견데 시시 나서 되는 다양한 로비에 다당하서 대해서 바탕 되는 양아서 대해서 레송 다들 양질이 양고 좀 근데 소가가 담보 네 뭐사야 되는 교야 되는 기능하는 쪽을 아마 얘네 손듭지야 소득이 와서 냠게 되는 기능하는 쪽이 스타트랭크 가장 같이 신년 된 바라 아니 제단을 로션이나 되게 양 원조 손들 갖다 같이 뭐 내가서 그래서 하고 이니 아니 뭐 중요한 게
생긴 소들들 다리 되게 준비돼 준비 준비돼 유신이 저거 팬이 된 저거
네 위험해. 이거서 뒤는
So after a bit of a break from our teachings on Lojong, mind training, we start back again today. Start back, as always, with our practice of mind training, beginning with the practice of expelling the stale winds, focusing on engendering the proper motivation, giving rise to our intention for receiving these teachings and engaging in this practice, followed by our supplication prayers. So we'll begin with that, and then the teachings themselves will continue with where we left off our last class, where we discussed the benefits of liberation and also began the discussion on the way to rely upon the kind spiritual teacher. So we didn't quite finish that discussion on how to rely upon the kind spiritual teacher, in particular the supplication prayer at the conclusion of that section of practice, in the section of that text. So we'll begin the teaching with that today. So now we'll expel the stale winds. We'll do 3 rounds, 1 on each side and 1 in the middle, as we are short on time.
네, 다 양난과는 무슨 대단 상기적 것도 같자. 예, 제도 되네. 로평. 냠내는 거 저 그냥 그런 때 삼마샤도 개바 직사다고
Now focus on engendering the precious mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, the supreme of all motivations. Thinking that for the sake of every single sentient being as vast in number as the sky is vast to attain the level of complete enlightenment, the stage of Buddhahood, that it's for that reason we'll enter into the spiritual training of Lojong, mind training practice, in order to accomplish that. So with that as our intention, we focus now on engendering bodhicitta.
얘네 다 되는 게 기타한 파제다 되는 거다가 심지에 저다가 좀 많이 더 있네요. 아니 파제 되는 가장 되다 로데나 갑도 기회신이 되는 건조됐어. 근데 당보다다 아니 손들부터 다 보시지 좀 인식이 되는 얘가 가장 유명해서 지켜줘.
So I prepared the prayers, the supplication prayers that we'll engage in when contemplating on bodhicitta. But since we still have some of this section on the way to rely upon the kind spiritual teacher, then we should be reciting that. So this week I'll recite that from the text, 2 portions of that, of the prayers that relate to the, that are to be recited when contemplating the way to rely upon the kind spiritual friend.
No. 다들 좀 산지 던지지 다들 저기 말이 또 대선관계 담겨정오 라마rum보제 제노 달라왕구르 신겨라 바란제도소 그게 자외 라마rum보제 제 라마 상제서 통외연된 대다 다게 줄라 제발 신겨라도
Guided by many learned and accomplished sublime beings, you have practiced and experienced the instructions of your teachers. You point out the sublime path unerringly to others. Peerless teacher, at your feet I bow.
Tambien kero mabu jeso lamne kayin lomni nyamso lam tarbe lam cho manoron rola chungme lamye shabla chaza.
Through your great wisdom, you have realized nirvana. Through your great compassion, you willingly embrace samsara. Through your skill and methods, you have realized that they are no different. Fearless teacher, at your feet I bow.
Japsum tenjang nyeni yeche wen lopsum no jang sungdom yawara por dadong dangre nyingne senje mado teba tembo shinje lo.
I have met a sublime teacher, but let myself down by my negative behavior. I have found the best path, but I wander on precipitous byways. Bless me and all those of bad character like me, that our minds may be tamed by the Dharma.
Hola, somos Tene. Tati, kitang kita katong ni pache. Also, ni tani ngaram sa tambo lama. Tamba, parda temba. Ini desu ko ni pache katang nga so. Pache prosons.
So our last meeting, we began the discussion on how to properly rely upon the kind spiritual teacher, going through the first 2 phases of this process. The first step of properly analyzing or investigating the teacher, the potential guru, the master, and also the proper way to then, having investigated, analyzed the teacher, then how to rely upon, depend upon the teacher. So we've pretty much covered those first 2 topics.
Tani, ngaram se yani. 다 비비 신년 생인데 아니 강아서 애청 차이거든. 얘네 다 통을 지금 알아서 상지 개정 되는다. 통을 지금 알아서 신년에서 댐믹 아니 값서 값제만 원자바다. 얘네 된게 돌아다 주. 얘네 차이다 나타서 내를 통해요. 근데 까먹고 제밖에 남자들이 여러 봤어.
So what we call a kind spiritual teacher. It's extremely important, and to understand what this is extremely important. At first, in similar ways to the Buddha, through going through great austerities, difficulties, receiving extensive teaching, contemplating on and gaining understanding of both the words and meanings of the profound Dharma, and in various ways endeavoring, striving, going through difficulties to gain accomplishment. We can hear all those different details in the many different stories of the life and liberation, the biographies of the great masters.
Nisongdang, tene ngarang ze lama mebi kano la chu sangji sebi menyang nesa. Tene karpa pongu sangji yang lama tala tene chongs netri yo res.
As it's taught, there's this famous saying that without relying upon a master, without relying upon a guru, not even the name of the Buddhas will be heard. And of all the Buddhas of this fortunate eon, all the masters that will gain complete enlightenment, there's not a single one that will gain this accomplishment not by relying on a guru.
다 기회 시행돼서 당나라 쪽 배는 짓을 해내 소리 현도 되니 당나라 딱시 되니 나서 애니 딱서니 애니 다 되는거라서 애니 맞아 애니 지금 와서 시행년의 배치 애니 시행년의 땜바대용 다 지금 와서 애니 되는 지금 그바도 제가 좀 대양거 되니 말을 봐 아니 담아대다 아니 준 투줄 야베다 간다더니 당가란 저거 아니 담비축 아니 제가 저 양대 다 되게 내가 저 탐지더니 참 배드기서를 나오게 다처럼 담고 퇴발지 아니 그 사료기 값서 되는 대나게 다 배드기서를 되네 라마 담바 남기장 냠석랑 저거와 되냈어야 되더니 냠석용도 값서요 대탐지를 한 거야 냠석용 아니 냠내제도요 다 대탐지를 지금 알아서 인어라고 제가 마셔봤지 얘들서 다 인사를 지 쉬어봐 인사봐 퇴로 퇴송상가도 근데 잠시 많이 봐 근데 대소를 지금 알아 정도 지어지네 왜다 하는 되니 쉬지 냠내는 다시 지어지 왜다 봐야 좀 그러면 지금 이나요 맞좀 지금 뭐 강모들이 알아 좀 되니 해봐지 대비기 기술들은 때라 나란식으로 봐 나란제도 그 값은 다 찍대라 연담 매일 해도 말에 대해서 다 지금 계속 쳐지 근데 냠용도서도 다시 줘고 냠용 다시 줘니 뭐다 공주도 없으면 됐어 뭐다 때려 뭐다 뒤 아니 지금 같이 이나 되는 말아 저도 빅사셔야 냠는다고 제이나 되는 냠는도 solaya 자 오다지야 오다 되는스다 되는 카네를 되는 교과이나 다 때라가라 공주 소리게 들어봐 다 말아서 Yes.
So because that's the case, that to gain enlightenment, one must rely upon a guru, a master. Find and rely properly upon the kind spiritual teacher. Then, initially, it's essential that you perfectly analyze, investigate, check out the potential teacher. Having gone through that phase and recognize that they're a suitable, qualified teacher, then you rely on them. Rely on them various different ways of serving the teacher, relying upon them with devotion and reverence and respect. But just relying on the teacher, just affording them respect and devotion, won't actually get you anywhere. So it requires that we have the third phase of training in taking up the enlightened qualities of the wisdom mind of the teacher into our own mind stream. Which means realizing for ourselves, taking into our own experience the enlightened qualities of the sublime Dharma that pervade the mind of the teacher. So we do this through the process of not just listening to and receiving the teachings, but having listened to them, then taking them as our own practice. By practicing the teachings received, they become integrated in our own experience. So having gone through the phase of listening, receiving teaching, then in the same way that our own teacher has practiced, engaged in the spiritual trainings being taught, then we engage in the exact same ways. We engage in the same ways to take the teachings that we've heard and to gain a definitive understanding of them. In order to cut through the potential misunderstandings, imputations, and doubts regarding the inner meanings, the actual meaning of the teachings being received, they have to be practiced. It's through the process of practicing the teachings, taking them as our own experience, that certainty in the definitive meaning can arise by cutting through any doubt, any misunderstanding, gaining a clear understanding of what actually is, what isn't regarding the teachings, how they truly are. In this way, our spiritual experience then can develop, proliferate more and more. So when we talk about this third phase of how to properly rely upon the kind spiritual teacher, called training in the wisdom mind of the master, this is the process of it.
말은 좀 가르쳐 버리잖아. 다 담보대 말은 좀 되는 아니 맞아 말다 사디가 좀 아니 터바치가 왔다 됐어 좀 좋게. 근데 되게 또 나한테는 양 말은 좀 싸먹다고 그랬어. 싸먹다는 때 간대에서 서와 싸먹다니 얘네 다 대단한 좀 배편이 양 나한테 때 생해봐 샤오들이 대양 말은 좀 이시지는 거나 저 디손 지원들이 양 참참나 가고 나서 참아 고속성이라고 좋아해. 나한테 참아 고속성. 양 싸먹다는데 얘네 양 때시 똑바로 나오는 거지. 양 걔네가 되더라고 지겠다는 말은 좀 공부하려고 근데 맞아 들삼 검som 야마라서 뭐다 두세이다 근데 말은 저 배는 뭐다 친들 뭐지 다다 두서라면 샬롬 그래서 얘니 공부다 센터 값서 요사대 저리요 참는요 참관 그냥 다 되라 얘는 말은 저 다다다 캠포 이행가서다 그래서 다 캠포 공연 참는요 걔들 뭐지 참는요 와
캠포 신은 견제해버리니까
니가 어쨌든 참관을 이거를 이제 참관을요 내가 다 빼진다고 해라 배팅 나 다티는 당고 샤노도 당고 저저기 이바테네 저저기를 샤노나 와 되네야 되네 사드 되네 생활하면서 되네야 같이 나 사드 아니 양절 되네 거라야 배치기 개개인도 야 배치기 개개인 되게 양절 되네 맞아 그래서 고 살까 되네 거라 봐다 신나당 가거든 사전 인용 필요해서 되네 달라 rol에 되네 마 되서 공접진 쇼 다 공접진 쇼는 되네 양더 쓰네 양게 그래서 되네 산이 쇼가 되네 가장 간제체 내 싸움 가래다 양 차상 고조파 육조시 양 가장 되네 경고 가래 송여 되네 거라고만 본드 가래요 양 산이 차상이야 되네 육조시 어떤 뜻이야 예 님은 딱 걸려 뜻이지요 전대로 지금 자연한 같은 데도 없어
So in particular, in training in practice of Lojong, mind training, we go through these different phases of practice of listening, contemplation, and meditation. So initially, having received the teachings, listen to them, then what we've received, we contemplate on, we think about it, analyze it. What's the meaning behind this? What's the real meaning in this? Then gaining some semblance of an understanding of the meaning, then we cultivate the understanding of that meaning through meditation. We meditate on that meaning. We join the meaning that we've contemplated on into our own experience by meditation, that third aspect of meditation. So first we receive the teachings, and then whatever slight, if there's some sort of doubt regarding the understanding, if we're not fully clear on it, then we ask questions, we contemplate on it to clear away those any sense of doubt or misunderstanding regarding the teachings that have been received. And then coming to a clear conceptual understanding, then we take that understanding into our meditation, meditate on it. And if we've received the teachings and they've been very clear and there's no real understanding or no real doubt in the understanding, we've gotten it conceptually, then we directly engage in that understanding in our meditation. So in this way, going back and forth through these three phases at all times, then really we're, it's called the training in the three phases of listening, contemplation, and meditation inseparably, all three informing each other. And this process is what we call the Myung tree, or the experiential guidance lineage, which is that tradition of practice that comes to us through Dogo Khenpo Rinpoche. Dogo Khenpo Rinpoche, who received this, these instructions in this method of practice from his own teachers, in particular from Khenpo Ngagchung, where he received instruction on Word Teacher. Received the teachings on Words My Perfect Teacher as we are now, and then staying in mountain retreat in a retreat center in Tibet, along with his master, with Khenpo Ngagchung. They were staying there together. He would receive the teachings and then meditate on their meaning, both master and student staying in retreat at the same time. Would receive teachings, and then likewise he was also bestowing teachings, those teachings to others, so he would take his turn in teaching to others. They went through this process first through, based on the text, the word, or Bodhicharyavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, and having gone through the training of experiential guidance of Bodhicharyavatara, then they did a similar process with Words My Perfect Teacher, where Khenpo Rinpoche would receive the teachings, and then they're outside the confines of the retreat center. There were beautiful mountain meadows and forests that he would go meditate on the meaning, contemplate on it, meditate on the meaning of the teachings he'd received. Then the following morning would return back to the teacher and report on his understanding In this way, having this dialogue of receiving teachings, meditating on their meaning, and returning with your answer and experience back to the teacher, and the teacher providing the next phase of instruction. So this is in Khenpo Rinpoche's the story of his life. He discussed this process of meditation that he received in this particular lineage of Nyongtree, of experiential guidance. So training in this way, within the context of Lojong mind training, then also important for us to remember that in any type of meditation, Lojong included, we have the two phases of meditation: analytic meditation and placement meditation, or resting meditation. So the phases of contemplation and the phase of receiving teachings fall within the first category of analytic meditation. And then having completed, following the phases of analytic, investigative meditation, then you engage in placement meditation. In a similar way to as we talked about last time. So within the phase of how to properly rely upon the kind spiritual teacher, the phase of investigating the spiritual teacher, analyzing their qualities and investigating whether or not they're an authentic teacher for you or not, then that all is within this first phase of analytic meditation. Then having gone through that phase and engendering devotion, a devoted connection, trust, faith, and devotion in the teacher, then that is the phase of placement or resting meditation. So having the phase of contemplating, anytime there's contemplation is analytic meditation. Then developing devotion at the end is, in the next phase, the conclusion, is the placement meditation. So the placement meditation here, when you're sitting in your practice of Lojong, then allowing the mind to not ruminate on any thoughts of the past, not chase after or invite any thoughts of the future, and whatever thoughts arise in the present moment related to the present moment, to allow it to dissipate and become nothing, to allow them to dissipate with no attachment or fixation to any thoughts of past, present, or future, then remaining resting in a state of equipoise. In that state, then is the phase of placement meditation to be engaged in. So then arising out of that state, then as with all of our other phases of practice, you dedicate whatever virtue has been amassed for the sake of all sentient beings.
다 Lojong 샤비야 고왕의 제바이나 다양 샤고의 가세서 월스나 대나 이신이 때마다 샤고 솜 세고레스 기초 샤고 솜.
So when you're engaging in the actual 100-day retreat of Lojong, in this tradition of the 100-day Lojong practice, then this phase of contemplation, the Lojong, the mind training focused on the way of relying upon a kind spiritual teacher, is to be engaged for 3 days, 3 of the 100 days.
다 디니다 나란 조금아 다 제단 그 고람라고 치나 다 이 연초대 체험으로 양로대 다 가장 멋있어가다니 Lojong 얘네 뭐 처음에 제 얘네 나란 좀 튼지요 숨차지가 니 잠로대 냠나 간사다 차차 잡스 잠로 쳐야돼 Lojong 냠을 쳐줘요 봐 이거를 때는 가장 뭐만 떼스지 때는 맞아 주소 당고 당고는 알아서 이래 맞서 이내야 때는 가장
농비.
대값을 먹는 값을 때는 너희들하고 지금 쉬어요 딱 그거보다 어쨌든 미세 고좀데 샤비아는 나는 샤랑데 나는 연구요 말해 가르쳐는 포다데 내 탐시하는 거 등에 시작 마치 이런 집이거든요 차직되나 얘네 양말은 정말 Lojong 너무서 조직이 다 신나 붙어야 잘하고 가르쳐내야 잡으셔 소다 되니 소사 대반장 그냥 조직되는 Lojong지 공적 전쟁이 들어봐야요 조직이나 얘네야 늦어 보다 잘하고요 가르쳐내야 니마가 공부를 가야지 하면 대가 되는 마찬가지는 무슨 너 삼야대양가 되니 지금서 가서 대학에서 탐지해 찍더니 가서 그냥 차오 되니 대학에서 가서야 마 뭐가 제때는 늦어보네 야야 하고 제때는 가서 가서 막 차체 얘네 때는 얘들은 양 가서 소란다 드리더니 양치 싸바지 차이고도 와 지금 앞에서 종류라고 그럼 앞에서 다 많이요 근데 배에서 아까운 뭐 잡는 뜻은 쳐들어 다 떠들어서 나대에서 건성 그냥 양제 커서 막 대개를 집에 양고 되게 많은 레비지는 찬양 거예요. 예선다 다 아무래도 가자 되는 가제 아 좀 그런 지키는 쉬어이 이제단 로장도 도스래
So in general, everything up to this point, up to and including the way of relying upon the teacher, consists of the practices of the stages of the outer preliminary practices, the outer ngondro. So then we have the practices of the inner ngondro. So in the inner ngondro practices, beginning with refuge and bodhicitta. So the practice of refuge doesn't really have its own Lojong contemplative practice for itself. It's generally just engaged in from as soon as you start the trainings of Lojong, of mind training, then you'll be beginning also with whichever phase of the Lojong you're in, you'll be engaging in the practice of refuge. Refuge and together with prostrations. So generally the 100-day retreat, if you're in it, then 1/3 of every session will be devoted to the practice of refuge joined together with prostrations. So we talked a little bit before about refuge, discussed it, gave kind of a cursory discussion on the practice and of taking refuge. Not when we started the teachings on Lojong, but during the reading transmission of Words My Perfect Teacher, Rinpoche spoke some about refuge. and also a means to invoke the blessings, invoke enlightened blessings of the lineage of the Buddhas of the Three Jewels, and also a means to amass the accumulations, purify obscurations, while engaging in the more strictly contemplative practice of Lojong, of the contemplation. So on the one hand, it performs that function by connecting to the enlightened beings, the Three Jewels. You're enhancing your contemplation. You're bringing down the blessings. And on the other hand, it also just enhances one's Lojong practice by refreshing the body. If you're in retreat, a Lojong retreat, and all day, every day, the entirety of every session, you're just sitting on your cushion, thinking, contemplating, then this leads to some trouble. Your body starts to ache, you're not feeling right, your vision gets slightly impaired, you start feeling sick, you can just get depressed and hazy in mind and you fall asleep and probably become extremely bored. So the practice of refuge and prostrations in particular, where you stand up and reawaken the body, refresh the body, do something physical to just reawaken the body. Do something physical, you're reciting refuge, engendering devotion, making supplications to reawaken, reinvigorate the practice of Lojong itself. So for this reason, this is why prostrations and refuge are engaged in throughout the whole 100 days as a part of the practice. So, yeah. So, up to this point, so Rinpoche says, we have discussed, kind of given a little bit of a discussion already to the practice of refuge, the meaning and how to practice refuge.
다 되게 성도다 드림 바제 되는 좀 다 바제 되게 성장 되냐 다 조드네 생계를 다 바치 버스 sabino 다 약속도 꼴이야 이제 좀 시제 다 드림 게 되는 거는 이제 다 로중 다 나니 다 지금 코랑은 나니야 다다 니에서 담비는 저 뭐라고 다 뭐용 용만 나와대 다 가려서는 아니 다 장점지 생 장점지 생기야 그래 장점지 생기
So the main topic for today's teaching is to be bodhicitta. We're getting our teachings on bodhicitta, the engendering the precious mind of enlightenment. So we've discussed some on refuge, so engage in refuge in those ways we've discussed, and then today, the main topic of Lojong really is the main practice itself of Lojong. Conjunction read.
지금
it's coming in and out. Okay.
It's
that
not.
last class too.
Did it? We should have always that. We shouldn't rely on the Wi-Fi.
Lost sound.
You have this cable?
I think it's in the front. I think it may be in the front. I think it's not. No.
It's working right now. Yeah.
알았어. 되니? 강달 되니 말하는 속에 또 세다 말하는 또 그 도지 말하는 기쁨마도 사모야 그 피해인데 얘는 사모야 거의 양자다 사모 상자다 얘는 다 대낭이 얘는 다 말하는 속에는 자체당 자체 다 도스지야 돼. 나 저거 다 로종 생기는 됐어요.
So when we say Lojong, literally mind training, training the mind, how should we understand this? What's the main point behind this? What are we training our mind to do? It's taking a mindset, a focus that is narrow in scope, closed down, not broad, not vast, a way of thinking, perspective that is solely focused on oneself, primarily engaged just with oneself, one's own needs, one's own life. And taking that way of thinking and transforming it to make it more open, more open-minded, broader, vaster, kinder. All of these qualities are what we work for, are the meaning behind mind training. We're training our mind to be vaster, more open, more connected to others.
이제 인상 되니 말하는 쪽으로는 아니 다 삼바데 말하는 쪽 아니 상고지 여바이나 다디 기아나 지금 말하는 쪽 가서 아니 햄바도 배나 다 말하는 쪽 아니 잠바 인게다 삼바데 말하는 상고지 여나 네야 말하는 걸 미쳤더라야 다 팬데지 상당 나랑 좀 배나 애니 차리부터 소개할 때 아재 나오는 것은 애니 다 배는 나랑 저 애니 제당기 지마랑 좀 차대는 차이나요. 애니 때는 이게 애니 내가 토라이나요. 책이 대지게 토라이나요. 아니 팬데지 애니 기회가 왔어.
So for those that have a kind mindset, a good heart, a mindset, altruism, with love and compassion, individuals that have these qualities, that have perspective mindsets, that possess these qualities, then it's not just beneficial for the afterlife, but it's very beneficial, helps this life right now, in the present moment. It's not just the Buddhist teachings that are speaking to this, but there's all sorts of scientific studies now and scientists doing research on this, and the positive benefits to one's health, to one's long life, to one's work and activities of having a good heart, of having these qualities of love, compassion, altruism.
삼바상은 사당하면서 삼바는 사당하면서 탐지 삼바다는 알레비 나도 삼바상은 똑같이
And from the perspective of the Buddha Dharma, that's exactly the same. The prescription is to have a kind heart, to train in engendering the qualities of having a kind heart. There's a famous quote, if one's intention is good, one's mindset is good or excellent, then the paths and levels progressed likewise will be excellent. If one's mindset or intention is negative, then likewise the paths and levels progressed upon will likewise be negative. Therefore, in reality, all depends on one's mindset, one's intention. Because of that, I will always train in having a kind heart, a excellent mindset.
yang dewa jache chong sing te samba la ra bena ta twa chi chong ye go yo na yang ra ene pen do je te ko te ni ngaran so ko bena ta che ba 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 to hie na yang ra ta ji ta do do ji ta ma da samba to da de do samba ko ta ji ko ni ni ta ya che ro do bena ngaran so ko te ni je ji benata nga to dubji nga to mini somyona dubsa de chipa chikyang chi dubyo na rewa ta geba chi dubyo chi rewa samba khudang goni yani khashi dex me ba cha khashi dex tene mara so ja chang bo cha khashi che me ba cha kanga de samba chi ku chi de ya so.
So in brief, really, everything depends on one's mindset. It's all contingent upon one's mindset, one's intention. What vehicle you're in within the Buddha Dharma. The lesser vehicle, the greater vehicle, Hinayana or Mahayana, is contingent upon one's mindset. The scope of one's motivation and intention. That's really the dividing line. Whether or not an action is virtuous or non-virtuous. For the most part, we have the appearance of the action, but really whether or not something is virtuous or non-virtuous is primarily contingent upon the intention, the mindset behind it. And then likewise, the scope of a virtuous action also is contingent upon one's mindset, the intention, the mental state behind it. So we have the virtuous actions of the Mahayana and the path of the Vajrayana, which is expert and skillful means. And really, these skillful means are contingent, are based upon one's mindset. The results of them, the scope, the immeasurable scope of the virtue that can be amassed through these skillful means, is really entirely based upon one's mindset and intention, where one's mind's at. It's based on that these divisions can be made. So say you have a few people, 2 or 3 people engaging in the same activity, the same actual action. That's a positive action, but the result, the scope of virtue of that single action, even though the action itself may be identical, the mindset and intention behind it will distinguish how great the virtue of that action may be. For one individual, it may be a slightly virtuous action. For another, it may be hugely virtuous. And yet for another, it will be immeasurably virtuous, entirely based upon the mindset that one engages in that action. One example of how this works. Say we're engaging in a type of spiritual practice. practicing kind of meditation, maybe calm abiding shamatha practice. So we have 1 hour that we're going to meditate, do a shamatha practice. So the practice itself will be the same, but what's the motivation behind it? Why are we doing it? So maybe we're thinking, I'm going to meditate for this hour right now because I've been a little sick, and if I meditate, that's going to help my illness and make me feel a little better, calm me down. Or maybe we're thinking, if I meditate, I do something that will change things around for me, my luck will, come back. Anyway, some type of motivation that's connected to a temporary benefit, gaining some type of benefit in a worldly sense just for this life. Going to engage in this meditation to get something from me right now so that I'll feel better, get some type of immediate benefit. So focusing on, with such a motivation for any activity, including a meditation practice, then the benefit, the outcome of that can only be a temporary benefit. If our aim, our motivation is solely focused on some type of worldly benefit, a temporary happiness, then that's all that we'll be able to fulfill for us. So that's one type of motivation you can have. Maybe you have a motivation, you're engaging in your meditation practice out of your fear of falling into hell. You're terrified of hell and the 3 lower realms, and really samsara altogether. So I'm sitting here, I'm meditating so that I can finally be liberated, become free of the suffering of samsara. But the scope of that motivation is really still just focused upon yourself, your own liberation. I'm meditating so that I can gain liberation, so that I can be free of all this suffering. Having any type of motivation like that that's focused on one's own liberation from samsara, then is similar to the motivation of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. The Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, is a lesser motivation. And even though such a motivation is aimed at liberation, freedom from samsara, it does not become limitless, boundless. And then likewise, the virtue amassed is not limitless, is still defiled, exhaustible. So then the motivation of the Mahayana, the great vehicle, thinking that I'm engaging in this solely for the sake of every single sentient being, the infinitude of sentient beings that are reached the limits of space. Sentient beings as vast in number as space is vast. Space which has no limit, has no measure. To the same degree, sentient beings which have no limit, no measure, are countless. For the sake of sentient beings being freed from all of their suffering, every form, every cause of suffering, I'm engaging in this practice. For the sake of myself personally endowing every single sentient being with happiness and well-being and alleviating their suffering, I am engaging in this practice. Then with that as your motivation, then likewise as sentient beings are infinite in number and limitless, and then one's motivation likewise is limitless and infinite, and the virtue amassed likewise becomes measureless, inexhaustible, and infinite. So we can see in these different ways, the activity itself is exactly the same. The thing to be accomplished, the practice of I'm going to meditate, I'm engaging in shamatha, calm abiding for 1 hour is exactly the same. The motivation completely different. And then likewise the result, the virtue, the karmic result and virtue amassed from that same activity is completely different.
양한테 나한테 맞춰 뭐 아무지 재미나 다가는 됐어. 산지 나한테 가도 무슨 산지로 나도 산지 비교돼 가랭이세나 요때 야세나 장점지 셈에서 이제 장겹지선. 뭐나 다 장겹지선 여덟 가래서. 전에 장겹지선데 다 여덟 다 알아서 막 얘네 잠바다 인진이 되는 말이야.
Well, we can think about it in the following way. So if we're in the context of the Mahayana, the great vehicle, then our ultimate thing to be attained is complete enlightenment, Buddhahood. So then, what is the cause that leads to gaining complete enlightenment, the stage of Buddhahood, the realization of Buddhahood? Well, the cause for Buddhahood is bodhicitta, the precious mind of enlightenment. Really, there's no other cause than that. That's the main cause of Buddhahood, bodhicitta. So then what are the causes that lead to giving rise to bodhicitta? They're love and compassion.
다 말하는 다 선지성인데 다 가서 선지라서 다 말하는 그 변화 애네 다 선지라 변이 지가도 선지라는 로드 그 값sos 애네 다 당고 애네 다 관이 되는 거라서 뭐 초고 그래서는 다 지단 게 애네 맞아 체면가 있었어요. 다 말하는 좀 세피아사가 요르데 다지단 그 당만한 좀 변화 애니 같이 보이나 다 생견 탐지를 맺고요. 생견 탐지죠. 니급다. 되는 말하는 좀 애니 대화할 때 동물세 칼토그 되는 말하는 좀 동물 탐지 때는 그렇지. 애니 대화투야. 나 들리지는 것은 매고 봐. 뭐야? 다 원한 생견을 매기고 없어. 다 모양 다해서 좀 살아서. 되니 다 통만이 되니 말하는 좀 다 맞아. 로종 거야. 맞아. 다다 로데 무슨 도보데 체도당 야도당 당서당 다 간에 줘도 가래. 다 잠바 인제 가와 안는 생각. 맞추다. 뭐도 사대.
So then bodhicitta is what we need. So we're after bodhicitta. We need to depend, rely upon, and develop our bodhicitta. So with the training in bodhicitta, developing or stabilizing our bodhicitta, then where do we begin with bodhicitta? Generally, it's taught that to begin developing our bodhicitta, we begin with the four immeasurables. The training in the four immeasurables, where we take as our object of focus the all sentient beings. So anytime within the context of the Mahayana, the object of one's focus is the benefit of the infinitude of all sentient beings. Focusing on all sentient beings, that everything that we do is to alleviate their temporary experiences of suffering and endow them with temporary states of well-being, and ultimately establish them in the state that is stably or permanently free of all forms of suffering and endowed with stable bliss and happiness. But to focus on all sentient beings and everything that we do is quite difficult. So how do we start training in that? Well, we start through these practices of mind training. We train our mind gradually in phases to be connected to and focus on all sentient beings. Starting taking our mind in its in a narrow focused on just a few sentient beings, and then gradually expanding the scope, opening our mind to connect it to all sentient beings. And we do this through the focusing and meditating and cultivating these aspects of four immeasurables, namely love, compassion, joy, and equanimity.
다 양디 잠반인지가 왔다 놈생인데 맞죠. 네. 농가 지고 자면 지금 레미도 같이 다음 잠바 이제 가와서는 좀 듣는 거 도와야지. 맞죠. 아니 양 앞에 감지했어. 얘네 지당 그당 말하는 거 시험도 값어 잠바 인제 가왔다 놈생인데 양 내가 처음에 생긴 결혼으로 양 괜히도 소소참 지당 그 잠바 처음에 인제 잠바 인제 처음에 가와 잠바 네 진짜 다른 말하는 거 처음에 봐 이제라고 되나 양 처음에 봤으니 조금 이거는 매거 요를 생긴 처음에 봤다고 때는 못 봤다고 때는 내나 양들 처음에 통말 잠바스 이때는 양 말하는 속에는 용도서는 가리라고 해서 상근이 봐 이겼어 가인에서는 탐지지 비교를 조금만 참 상지 비교를 너무 많아 가만히 들어버렸으면 거의 이때 아야 사다 아니 이제 나가서 저거도 다 성과이거나 상대 뒷받쳐 소리야 뭐야 아니 사람 지역이 옆에서 내가요 내 상리 기스 상리 기스 그죠
So love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So these four ideas, qualities, are unique just to the Buddhist tradition. They're kind of universal ideas, universal qualities. Everybody has these ideas in the practice, championing love, compassion, joy. So when we talk about them in the Buddhist context, there's a distinction between love and immeasurable love, love and measureless love, compassion and measureless compassion. In the Buddhist context, we talk about mere love and immeasurable love, and mere compassion and immeasurable compassion. And the main dividing line between this that makes one's mere love immeasurable or measureless love is the object of the focus of the love. The object of one's love or one's compassion, if it is the infinitude of sentient beings, the all sentient beings, if that's the object of one's love, then that love is immeasurable love. If it isn't, then it's some form of mere love. So in the scriptures, it talks about this distinction and often calls the not immeasurable not the four immeasurables that aren't immeasurable, calls them the four abidings of Brahma. The abiding of the love Brahma abiding. Pointing out making the distinction between if these four qualities are not immeasurable, meaning not focused on every single sentient being, then they can never become the cause that, or a cause that will lead to, progress one to realizing Buddhahood, complete enlightenment. They'll keep one within the realm of cyclic existence of the world, at best leading to the attainment of the stages of the celestial realms of Brahma. So for that reason we call them the four abidings of Brahma.
아마도 마키나서 니가 다 그럼 최대한 야롱장 무슨 거 같은 거 다시 야롱장
야롱장.
근데 다 추하게 되는 거 흉가요. 근데 가야지 매사. 근데 가다 니가 셈을 내가랑 장기라 니가 쳤노라. 손이 희소래. 이나야 코니 째기 근데 다 상복 대그 똑 근데 지금 대마자 니가 돼야 아니 나야 아니 사기니라 안데 다 그래서 상북이 내가 계속 잘했어 안제마도 남아도 생는데 누가 저다 그냥 고소시했어 고소 가르치 고소야 성일 계절 제야도 고소는 되면 개와도 가르도 제야 아니 고소가 시간아 다 가는 시간으로 대나 삼반 상북 그런 얘기들이 네가 하지 어디 나는 시간 성성 애는 안 저기 레이잖아 다 고소야 제야 유연은 면하지 가다야 되는 상북이 어떠니 나가 상일을 기송을 했어 왜 대답을 했어
Long ago, there was a mother and a daughter that were in ford a river in a boat, and a gale wind came up and capsized their boat. They fell out, knowing how to swim. They each were carried away by the river, probably the Lojong River, a very kind of wild, big rapids river. So they're carried away in this river, and each had tremendous love for each other. The mother, before drowning in the river, thinking, oh, if I die, that's fine, no problem if I die. May my daughter not drown in this river. May she somehow be saved. She's still so young and has her entire life ahead of her. May she not die in this river. Having this kind heart, this excellent mindset. And likewise, the daughter as well had a similar thought. It's fine if I die, but may something happen to save my mother. So thinking in this way, both with this kind heart's love in their mind. And through the power of that excellent mindset, and solely through that power, dying in that state of mind, they both were born in the celestial realms, in the realms of Brahma. So later, when the gurus and enlightened masters looked in, were asked to examine this situation, discuss the situation, how could that happen? It happened based on the power of dying in an excellent state of mind. That whatever other actions, whatever other karmas they'd engaged in, any kind of spiritual connections, was kind of a moot point. Dying in a state of mind of true altruistic love for another being, and simply based on the power of that mindset, they were born in the realm of Brahma. So the story kind of relates the explanation of why we call these qualities four bidings of Brahma, and so forth.
오나 다 다른 거라서 기타한 게 세미지 고람 다르잖아. 잠바 인제가 왔다 했어. 이내양 로종 게다 미세게 되는 거죠. 이게 고람 제나. 근데 강보 당연히도 그래서 말이야. 맨날 다른 거라서 그 되는 잠바다 인제 공부에 어렵다. 다 조직도 보지 마도 내가 그냥 가서요. 대차도 배나다 상비되가 오지 잘로 상비되지. 그래서 여러 생계단계로 맥고 위에서 당보 당연한 것을 보여서 당연 제는 상하지. 는 이제 가와지. 어떻게 스테이트들이 그래서
So today our training in four immeasurables. In general, when the four immeasurables are taught, the sequence begins with love, It goes from love to compassion to joy, then to equanimity. But in the practice of Lojong, when we're engaging in the practice itself, meditation itself, the initial focus in meditation should be on equanimity, engendering equanimity. Because, for example, if you train in love and compassion without any equanimity, then that love and compassion becomes bias. It won't be connected to, it won't be focused on the entirety of all sentient beings, but instead it will be biased towards a particular population or a single being or something. And in that way will not be immeasurable love and compassion. It will be the Brahma-style love and compassion. So because of the need to focus, be able to focus on the entirety of all sentient beings, we need to initially give rise to equanimity. And then based on that foundation, the basis of equanimity towards all sentient beings, then we develop love, compassion, and joy.
다 원하스 다 당고 당념성에 가려져서나 땅스도 놈 땅스도 가려져서나 얘는 자가 땅와 얘는 착과라서 보다 초리 땅제제니 요를 잠바던 인계 검사 요때 얘는 세 매바 생년 담지로 맥고가 어때시야 땅좀 기타다 얘나야 다
You sentient that's something nyam.
야 상관 넘버시 얘나야 다 땅놈들 고지게 다시 뱀에 넣으면 또 땅놈승이지 양이야 가요 배는 사도로 위나 꼭 배가 말하다고 뱀에 넣으면 땅놈으로 와
사도.
된다고 그냥 내 땅놈으로 고사래 원하스 다 나한테 말하면서 다 땅놈 양보고도 와 원하 땅놈들 다 땅놈들 꼭 안에서 좀 그래서 다야 지금 가는 말은 그래서 다예 가까이 매는 데가 스게 땅놈들 뭐 땅놈 차로 근데 지금 가서 땅을 이거 뭐 이거래 다 원하 수야한테 샤바닝 이런 거 좀 먹고 와 이나야 이럴 때다 에는 믹서게 에네 다 안에서 이메일 거래서나 아주 몸도 그 값을 충충견이 야 채모를 좀 더 보라 당보를 하는 게 얘네 다 빼나 에네 다 가진 치슈도 다 나라는 쪽 빼나 상관없다 좋아 체인지 빼나 다 나는 게 아마다 제가 상관 제가 써먹 땅이 다 말씀은 요하다고 그러와. 대가 써먹 요하 땅이 다 강보 빼나더니 말하는 좀 빼나 마티기나. 근데 마티 맞잖아. 잠바 세와. 근데 말하는 좀 뭐 째요. 맞아 찍는데 맞아 가서.
하나이 나도.
응. 맞아 아마면은 맞아더니 째야 말해. 그래봐. 맞아 늦게 있는 거만. 아니 맞아 빼는 짓에 애네 하만 따올 때 솔직히 매바이나 아니 말하는 양 가대 때도 이제 고생 넣고 맞았나 아니 맞아들 너무요 말에 칼에 다시고 말에 감전에 접시고 말에 저쪽 와서는 갔다고 맞았는 강의에서는 와서 놔두고 말아 근데 여기는 그냥 와서 차차 대양 마셔보지 나오자 오늘째 하나째 다야 말하면서 미라 미시 저거로 아마도 그냥 여기는 아주 선전하고 차로고 가양 가양시 말하면서 그러나 애네 노가다 그래봐 이한테서 노가다 랑게 깡받는 랑 토바치 랑게 깡받는 랑 토바 온다데 수가리네서는 다 감이까지 와. 어떤 동시에야 땅용 먼저 가서 이러지 기는 가서 충격적인 야는 거죠.
First, the training in equanimity. Equanimity literally in the Tibetan, coming together two words, two verbs, one meaning to relinquish or to let go, and the other to equalize. So to let go and to equalize. So how are we to understand this? So to let go means to let go of the that which gives rise to anger towards one's enemies. To let go of aversion towards enemies, towards those that we don't like. And to let go of attachment or clinging to those that are close to us. So to let go of these and having aversion towards those we don't like and attachment, clinging towards those that we do like, towards those that are close to us, then any engendering of love and compassion will naturally be biased. So we're to let go of that. Having let go of that, then we are in a state of equality, equanimity. We've equalized our connection to all beings. So this equal state, this equal connection to all sentient beings, having released all anger and attachment, then is that equalized state. So we have these two aspects of letting go and equalizing, which is how we're to understand equality. So that being said, there's another way we can understand this, or that this term equality is understood in Tibetan. So equality can mean being equal in that it's of no benefit or no harm, which can be a quite a neutral state, really like nothing at all is going on, a state of complete neutrality, like a non-sentient thing. You're like the equality or the equality of being earth or stone. There's no connection at all whatsoever. There's no sense of harm, no sense of benefit, no connection whatsoever. So that potential state of equality or understanding of equality is a potential errant path that you can fall to. So we're to avoid that. Understanding the meaning behind equality, being free of attachment and aversion to those close and to those far that we're not close to. So when we're training in equality, there has to be a sense of a positive quality that we're engendering. Having just abandoned like any type of connection to those we're close to and any aversion to those that we're not close to, that we dislike, our enemies, then if there's nothing filling that void, then that's not the type of equality we're after either. A type of just complete indifference towards everybody. Rinpoche says maybe is likely a state that a lot of us fall into a lot of the time. It's kind of blank. I don't really care about any of you. I'm not that close to you. I don't really not like you. I'm just this bland, blasé state of equanimity. So that's not what we're after. The equanimity is in regards to how we connect to all sentient beings, to the objects of our focus. The qualities to be engendered based on that equanimity are then love and compassion. This is how we're to fill the equanimity. It's not this blank equanimity. It's an equanimity filled with love and compassion towards all sentient beings equally. That's the point, that's the focus. So then to train in this way, to truly have equanimity towards all sentient beings, we have to start small and gradually develop ourselves, the focus to be larger and larger, to truly be connected to all sentient beings. So the prescribed object of focus to start with is those beings that have been most kind to us, that have been most kind and loving towards us, likely your mother. So focusing our attention on engendering the qualities of love and compassion in order to have those qualities become equal to all sentient beings, we initially focus on our mother, contemplating on the kindness and love that our mother and our parents have afforded us. recognizing that without the kindness of our mother, we never could have been born. The kindness of her offering her own body for us to have been born. We wouldn't have a body if it wasn't for our mother. So having been born, then our mothers and parents offer us all sorts of kindness. Without our parents taking care of us, without the mother taking on the responsibility of nurturing and caring for us, then how likely would it have been that we would survive? Just having been born, we're barely more than a corpse. Without the mother or parent caring for us, we certainly would die. Having cared for us, giving us her milk, feeding us, caring for us in that way, not leaving it just there. If that had been all we'd been given, then we'd probably be little more than animals. But our parents have provided us the best education they could get for us. They sent us to school. They taught us various different qualities that we needed to know in order to survive. They taught us how to stand on our own feet, taught us how to walk, how to speak. Without them, we could have done none of this. So initially, we start out in this way, contemplating on and focusing on the kindness of our mothers of this lifetime.
다양 말한 좀 미다오이나 가시는 말한 좀 가서 이니 아바 아마니라가 보자고 얘네야 승계라고나 너는 뭐지 아바한테 그 저샤를 막 그거 보자고 아니 보자고 봤어 나 아마한테 그 뺏기다 야자 야다마다 그 아마한테 다고 이제 미자고
Seahorse. So in the Buddhist tradition, all Buddhist traditions, there's a kind of a primary focus given to the kindness of mothers. The mothers are always considered the kindest and the most giving. So in the human realm, as human beings, sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes the parents kind of equally take on the responsibility of nurturing, caring for the offspring. But in most, for most beings, for most animals, it's really always this responsibility comes down to the mothers, primarily the mothers. Most animals, often the father shows up to do the work of consummation, but goes about his business, isn't there at all to help care for and nurture the offspring once they show up. It's the mother's responsibility to do that. Except seahorses, I added.
Penguins.
다 두스제니 왜나다 나랑 소양스 아다 다 때리지서래 애니 아마 가지고 요가나기 제와 옛날아 나도 타마다 지금 나랑 소 빼놨더니 약자고 따라자고 샤와자고 그래봐 나도 지금 한번 내차죠 누가 값을 나도 아마도 다 보잡어요 그랬어 대나게 선제 탐지르다 하는 다시 가서 멍슈라고 그래 말고 멍치하지 얘네 다 찍고도 얘네 멍슈 얘네 딱 나랑 저 배는 되게 좋아요 봤다 멍치하지 딱 안들 뺏으세요 선제 멍치하지 딱 아마를 뒤에봐도 벌써 멍해요 와라서 근데 얘는 대저거 값이야 배는 딱 나쪽 가서 얘네 가정식 뭐지 따가도 와 도스케들 쟤네 다다란 거 아마 나기 사람 꿈이 맞아 아마 되게 맞을 찍어지는 다 보자 대한테 다 다다대 뭐만이도 다 맞아 이어지 시험도 가지 집어요 지금 다 예휴되는 다다른 예화를 마도 얼마나 아마도서 지까지 그냥 잘 그때가 생겨던 지 많이 마시게 봐서 나다고도 마시 봐서 그래서 가서 처음에 받아보son다 마요 처음에 차로 처음에 비값서 나서라더니 가rin 대야 지까지 영현자 그러니까 그때 나다고 생겨던 지게 나를 마시
For us too, kindness of our mother in this life. We've had countless previous lifetimes. And when we were born in animal realms as a horse, a yak, a deer, and likewise. And all those births, and most births of sentient beings, and beings take birth through a mother, are born from their mother. And then it's their mother that kindly cares for them. So just like in our present lifetime that we're fully aware of, we can remember the kindness of our mother from this present lifetime. Then before it was exactly the same in previous lifetime. Our other mothers cared for us with the same degree of kindness and love. So really, we can't make any distinction. There's no division between the kindness of our mother in this lifetime and the kindness and love bestowed on us from the mothers of our previous lifetimes. The only difference really is that we're aware of it now, the closeness of it, but the kindness itself is equivalent. So because of this and thinking in this way, then we come to the first understanding that we're to come to of the recognition of perceiving all sentient beings as our kind mother. So just as we've had countless rebirths and taken countless bodies, then likewise we have had countless mothers, countless parents. And likewise they have bestowed on us an immeasurable compassion. So contemplating in this way, starting from recognizing the kindness and love offered to us from our own mother, and then recognizing that we've had countless lifetimes with countless mothers, then we give rise to the perception, the understanding of perceiving all sentient beings as having been our countless kind mothers.
아니 다 나서게 드라그 초대 와서 다 당이 초대죠. 얘기 초대 자꾸 초대죠. 근데 아마도 와서 가야면 저다 지당을 좀 차고. 가 나서게 야 로병체 사회고. 당고 맞죠. 마디죠. 와. 다 이니다 배는 아마도 좀 와서 그래서 봄내 나와요. 거에 다들 얘기 초대서 왔어. 야, 됐네. 다요. 이는 알아서 얼마 됐어. 그봐.
Khenpo Ngagchung Ngagchung.
예, 그렇죠. 되니 얼마 됐어. 다 얼마 돼서 다 가는 데는 다 가는데 딱 나와도 들라니 가야 많이 벌어. 대답 생겨서 답해야 많이 삼지. 그봐. 다 생겨던 게 많았어. 하고 드는 말하는 참 간 예휴들. 얘네들은 다 강대다 아마 찍고 보면 다 강대들은 드는 말하는 간 예휴 치워서. 그래서 제가 봐봐. 서로 대화되나 동아처럼 싸우는. 그래서 내가 인자 대부분. 다 얘네들은 가서 다 발치시라요 말이야. 얼마 됐어. 고소 지관에 아니 고소에 지금 가서 고소 성. 다 드니 다 지라돼서 고소가 가를 했다. 고소? 아니 고소야 이 지왔다가 트라이네요. 지키는 지와 뭐만 거더니 양 다쳐요. 지키는 지와 뭐 파마쳐요. 파마 이마 강시가 양 한 예휴지 다다 그라 두휴 차비 dimse 엄마 다 예휴라고 진짜 예휴의 차데 아니 서로 해한다고 그래 할 나밖에 두겨지 즈비기니 저지나 때는 다다 다시 하고 근데 진짜나 제가 얼마나 파마도 이마 아스기 근데 sonsa 다 대담제야 제가 그렇게 다 가서 파마 인상이 돈 근데 드라데라 용도와 다 강고 되는 거라는 소고 얘기 좋대 아마는요 다 되니 발마가 좋대 아마는요 근데 다 타마 드라데요 되는 거라는 소고 다 뭐니 고소해요 나게 가르쳐 고 제가 그런 거다 파마 인바다 생각하죠 대면은 고소 드라요 고자요 말아 내 칸 영어지요 내 칸 영어지는 다시 하고 되는데 되는 도스전에 오야 다 되니 드라라 땅 같아요 땅 되는 얘는 작가야 다 생기한 탐지 시험단 인기고요 되는 배께서 생기한 탐지 직관지 다 생기한 탐지 되는 생기한 탐지 오 도스전이 다 된다고 생각 그래요 얘네 생기한 탐지 다 뒤에 따르게 땅형체라는데 얘네 뭐야 없나 얘네 뛰는 인간 속가서 얘네 다 뒤에 따르게 잠바다 인계나 소고 공비요네 다른 생기한 탐지야 얘네 다른 나라는 소리가 얘네 빼기 잘 봐. 어떻게
meditating training is Lojong, equality or equanimity. Really, when we think about sentient beings, we can classify sentient beings into three groups. Enemies, our friends, and those that we're neutral towards. So our enemies are those that we have aversion to, that aversion and anger arises toward. Our friends are those that we have attachment to, clinging to. Those that we're neutral towards, really nothing at all arises towards them. We're completely neutral. No strong reaction to them at all, no connection to them felt whatsoever. So when we're training in Lojong, in the mind training of equanimity, we start out with the easiest. We start out with those that we're close to. Starting, as we said, focusing on our mother. And then not just with our mother, but expanding that focus to all those that we're close to, that we love, our relatives. Training and recognizing them all as having been our kind parents, our kind mother. So we do this because it's the easiest. We naturally have an affinity towards them, and it's the easiest to transform our perception of them in a way that we like. Engenders a sense of love and compassion. So then we follow this up with the next easiest, next hard, a little bit harder, focusing on those beings that we have no particular connection to, that we're totally neutral towards. We don't have a particular attachment, love towards them, and they also don't give rise to a sense of anger. We're neutral towards them, which is the majority of beings. So we connect to them, focusing on these beings, and training and recognizing them as being our mothers, or having been our kind parents, and giving rise to the sense of love and compassion that arises from that perception. So again, with starting out with thinking of our mother and our own mother and those that we're kind to and close to, giving rise to a sense of an aspiration and an intention of how wonderful it would be if they were endowed with happiness and free of their suffering. That's really what we're going for. So those that we're already close to, that's quite easy to get that flavor. So then we focus on those that we're no connection to, and training, giving rise to a similar sense of how wonderful for them to be free of suffering and endowed with happiness. If only this could happen. So then we move on to focusing on our enemies, those beings that we naturally give rise to aversion towards, those that we would classify as our enemies, beings that we don't like. So these such beings are enemies, so-called enemies. Really, they're not definitively our enemy. And it's likely that they've just arisen as our enemy in this single lifetime. And what the particular causes and conditions are that have led to that happening, we can't really say. And really, being our enemy and causing us lots of problems in this lifetime can only come about from a very close karmic connection. In fact, our strongest enemies in this lifetime, it's possible and even, we could say, likely that they've been our kind parents in a very near previous lifetime. And in that lifetime, we treated them poorly, acted in negative ways towards them. Without such close actions, activities of our harming them, then the causes and conditions for them to arise as our enemy in this lifetime just aren't there, wouldn't happen. So contemplating in this way, then we transform our perception of them as being our definitive enemy and give rise to this perception of them as having been our kind parent in a past lifetime, mistreated by us, and the karmic repercussions of that now manifesting in the form of them appearing as our enemy in this lifetime, as a means to transform our perception of them, to again come to the perception, recognition of them as being our kind parents, the whole goal. So then in this way we're starting out very gradually, where it's extremely easy to give rise to a sense of love and compassion and a wish that beings be free of suffering towards those that we naturally have an affinity to, then engendering the same sense towards those that we have no connection to, and finalizing it with the strength of contemplating on those that we have an extremely hard time with, that we are averse to. So then by doing this, training in this way, then the letting go of anger and aversion towards enemies is the natural result, which is, the first half, our sending away the anger, the aversion. And then likewise, any particular clinging or attachment towards those that we're close to, our relatives and loved ones in this lifetime, likewise dissipates. Those two dissipating, then we have the equanimity towards all sentient beings that we're after. So it's in this way that we're accomplishing the immeasurable equanimity, by contemplating in this way, meditating in this way. So then once you're able to do this, meditating and achieving this cultivation of a sense of equanimity towards the entirety of sentient beings, categorized as in these, those that we're close to, those we're neutral towards, and those that we consider enemies, then we likewise take that as our object of focus for the trainings in love and compassion. I'm not going to get So now we'll, so that's how to meditate on the mind training of equanimity. So now that we've covered that, we know how to do it, we'll recite our supplication prayers here that were handed out and meditate on equanimity. So in English, I pray to the glorious sacred Lama, the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, and the embodiment of the four kayas. Grant me the blessings of empowerment. Bless me that the extraordinary realization of the profound path arises in my mind stream. Kind Root Guru, grant your blessings that your enlightened qualities of bodhicitta arise in my mind stream. Through your great wisdom you have realized nirvana. Through your great compassion, you willingly embrace samsara. Through your skill and methods, you have realized that they are no different. Fearless teacher, at your feet I bow. I claim to be a rising bodhicitta, but still it has not arisen in me.
I am trained in the path of the six perfections, but I remain selfish. Bless me and small-minded beings like me, that we may train in sublime bodhicitta.
Tabla kebe konde yarme kume lame shabla shabla senko keba lam yang keba me chingro lam la lapya alam dande lojong semjo jongwa shinje lo. 당고 스캔드네 랑네 말라드네 다티시아바다지 에네 말은 말시바다 마이 중국식 시비 보니 말 삼바.
So now first, as was described, focus on your own mother, recognizing the kindness of your mother, remembering the kindness of mother, giving rise to a sense of gratitude towards the kindness of your mother.
다 되는 도스 체체 되는 말은 좀 에네 양 되는 얘기 되는 라운드 다 얘기 좋아라 삼다.
Then thinking in this way about those that are close to you, those beings that are close to you, your friends and relatives.
네 양 맞죠. 다 반얘기 좋아라 삼다.
And thinking about those beings that you're neutral towards.
네 담아드니 말은 조금 잘해야 삼다.
Then contemplating on your enemies.
그래서 나한테서 담기더니 나는 좀 이제 맨 상황한테 수직을 제고 말해. 강한달이 다 도스케는 다 그런 거다더니 또 스케제는 다 지금 가마대. 내가 다 말하는 좀 선제 탐제 라는 거 말해줘 봐. 예? 말 먼저 선제 지금 해 봐래. 말해줘. 선제 탐제 되는 다 말하는 좀 아니 대화도 때 동가지 tor 에 상계적 통통하게 말은 삼아제제 그래서 또 스케치했더니 나도 되는 대나이 아니 양소 왔다 대나이 했더니 지 딱 세매가 줄을 이제 넣어서 선 쏘았다 내 되는 대나이 제다 아니 줄라 양선 land 토바신 체계인 삼 선제죠. 되네 대나기 제 토바 쇼 삼제 되네요. 남자. 뭐 다토스요.
Then moving on to focusing on our enemies, recognizing all of them as having been our kind mothers. So when we're meditating in this way, each session we don't have to do the entirety of all three phases. Choose one focus on one or another. Then in the end of our meditation, this contemplation, then giving rise to a sense of recognition of every single sentient being as having been our kind mother. realizing that there's not one single being that at one time and another, in one lifetime or another, was not our kind mother. Then having a deep intention and aspiration that may all these mother sentient beings be endowed with happiness and free from suffering, and ultimately attain and be led to the stage of realization of complete enlightenment, Buddhahood. So engaging in this way then is the practice of training the mind in equanimity, immeasurable equanimity. And we follow this with supplication prayers, making prayers. In particular, may immeasurable equanimity truly arise in my mind stream. And vowing, making a commitment that I will train in engendering and developing immeasurable equanimity in my mind. And then likewise adding aspiration prayers. May I perfectly train in immeasurable equanimity, and may it become fully manifest in my mind stream. So training in that way then is the practice of training in immeasurable equanimity.
다들 우종의 샤브자는 있더니 네 샤브송 자때는 처음에는 내가 샤브송에 숨지 네 저스트를 했어 자때 장중이 생다 뭐 수사를 했다 그래서는 이거 아주 믹스했더니 다시 무시죠. 그래서는 마치 저쪽에 생 우유는 우유는 아니 결국 요르다 배트에서 아니 심장 감정을 못 봐. 심장 감정을 못 봐. 우유는 이게 로병인데 그러니까 멍게라고 참. 네 약고 좋나? 아니 이제 나도서 강해시라 내가 참.
So when doing the 100-day Lojong retreat, you engage in Lojong, you focus the practice on immeasurable equanimity for 3 days. And then each of the 4 immeasurables likewise are focused on for 3 days. So immeasurable love for 3 days, compassion 3 days, and joy likewise for 3 days, each for 3 days. So this training is really the foundation, the entry way into the mind training, or the Lojong practice of engendering bodhicitta. Training in bodhicitta really serves as the very basis for engendering bodhicitta. And is crucial, extremely important. So why is that? So if we need to, our purpose is to engender bodhicitta, then it requires that our object of focus becomes the infinitude of sentient beings. We have to be connected to, focused on all sentient beings. So in order to do that, we train in the 4 immeasurables. It's the equanimity as the very basis of connecting to all sentient beings as the object of our focus for the further development of bodhicitta. So it's the very basis of all trainings in bodhicitta. And if we train well in this, if we make this, the 4 immeasurables, a solid foundation, then the further developments of bodhicitta and the rest of the Lojong trainings come quite easily.
So
we'll stop there for now. I have time. If there are any questions, as I must give you to conflict. So one person sent me the question.
Just has a lot of thank yous. Yeah, that's
So the question is, came from page 184, Where's My Perfect Teacher? regarding undergoing medical treatment or a healing ritual, these are to be recognized as the activities of the three jewels, like the manifestation of the enlightened compassion of the Buddhas. So how are we to understand this? Or can Rinpoche please explain that? Penyon ki chawa tamche sangye ki ningje ki top ki jugiwe. Pechushagnanga neba chapa yina. Mencher shuyakte. Mencher de rang kunchuk sun ki chinleke. Kangas kutsubiure.
다 대해서 아니 다른 거는 지금 지금 대화다. 근데 지금 말하면서 내가 내 탐지 지금 고쳐거야. 저희 삼죠. 얘는 대만이 빼는 말하면서 소속되는 지금 다른 알아서 면주 내가 가지나 말하면서 면주를 지금 대형 되는 다른 말하면서 지금에 고쳐 트레이닝 상관이나 근데 말하면서 빼는 고쳐나 이제 전도야 말하면서 생래요 근데 지금 가서 고쳐는 이제야 봐서 근데 나랑 이제 우도 너무 기세들 너무 오바 아 너무 많이 지금 해 다 그래 좀
So all experiences of well-being, happiness, and worldly context too, all temporary qualities arising, temporary benefits, well-being, we can consider, perceived to be the enlightened activity of the three jewels. Likewise with medical treatments, we have some ailment, we have surgery, some kind of medical treatment. And if we think of it, if we perceive that as being truly, actually being the enlightened activity of the three jewels, then it serves like a function. In one sense, it engenders, increases our trust and connection to the three jewels, and then likewise will give us a sense of like courage, bravery in the face of that treatment, a sense of this is the activity of the three jewels. I'm connected to the three jewels, all will go well, it will be beneficial. So really, by perceiving in this way, it has an effect on our perception and benefits our mind.
대장 맞을 때 동아지 좋나 대양 나서 남치리야 그지나 대양 본초 같은 인삼나 이니 해도 좋아요 된다와 나랑 배치해서 되는 나차로 하고 있죠 예년도 가지 처음으로 그러 당가서 선천 넘어 얘네 차 근데 배치해서 성격관가 차 당가 차로도 배는 가는 속에 소보라고 지나더니 당보 소보를 두고 차와 대포를 세마디 두고 차더니 간간이 대가서 대양나 꼬셔고 트니 내 처럼 그때는 레다 득득함지 다리 꼬셔고 말 매지 내 저바탕지 다로요 삼자 야 호야 고쳐서 말하지 배는 내가 직접 약직 불안하고 지는 가서 잘한다고 가서 불안 통도 좋아. 불안가 서서만다고 지. 나와지 샤오는 가서 패도요. 로중이가 설을 줬대. 다 대대지 내가도 봐. 지금 내지 요나 대다 건전이 돼. 대다 내가도. 뒤에 맞아 깨년다고 있는. 대한들이 쓰는 남도 채토는 내시라 패도래서. only your mother, but you know, to skin the young Tona, me, all at Yang, I say, and all give to go.
So not only all qualities, all happiness, medical treatments, and so forth can be perceived recognized to be the enlightened activity of the three jewels, but likewise experiences of suffering and negative circumstances too can be taken on the path by recognizing them as the enlightened activity of the three jewels. Really, it's the best way to take negative circumstances as part of one's spiritual path, spiritual training, by perceiving all of that likewise to be enlightened activity to benefit oneself. So you get extremely sick, life-threatening illness, or some negative circumstance, some horrible situation befalls you. Normally something like that happens, and not only are you maybe physically affected by it, but then you're mentally plagued by it, tormented by it. You lose all courage, happiness, become depressed, overwhelmed by the experience in your mind as well. So initially something has happened to you physically, and then you're experiencing that torment and suffering, and you add on top of that the mental anguish and suffering. So in such situations, if you can perceive those situations and that suffering, whatever the occurrence may be, as the enlightened activity of the three jewels, that is manifesting as a means to purify, to cleanse away all of one's negativity, obscurations, and negative karma that's been amassed in the past, that whatever that situation is arising will suffice as a means to cleanse one of negative karma, negativity from the past. Recognizing it in that way, kind of in a similar sense of if you have a debt. You have a debt to someone, and whatever it is you have is taken away. You've given it away, but it repays that debt in its entirety. Then you're happy about that. So really perceiving it in that way. Oh, the enlightened activity of the three jewels has shown up to clean away my debt of negativity, negative karma. If you perceive it in that way, then it's very beneficial to be going through that situation. Really is a Lojong, a mind training. So when we talk about training and perceiving all good things, all qualities, as being the enlightened activity of the three jewels, that's quite easy to do. And it's beneficial, but really it's even more beneficial to learn and to practice seeing all situations, particular negative circumstances, as likewise being the activity to be of one's beneficial activity enacted by the enlightened beings. So meeting with negative circumstances, we really have no power to avoid. Things will happen to us. So then if you can take it as the path and train in it in this way, recognizing it as benevolent action of enlightened beings, then we still will meet with such circumstances, but it will benefit us and help those circumstances be alleviated and help us be liberated or freed from those circumstances sooner.
네, Lojong 소문인데 마찬가지로 나랑 Lojong 제사대 그래도 가발을 지어버렸으나 조금 어제 전에 맞춰 자미 좀 하는 거죠. 아 제가 다 저런 한건 나나다 나는 Lojong 맞에 그나 맞춰도 서로 왔대. 가려 그랬으나 냐마 무슨지 다 Lojong 때 되니 나랑 저 그때 신념내 지연이 가래 때를 줘서 치지 그래와 되니 같이 할 때는 나랑 좀 성강력치 참 이니 다 남아기지 가린당 저기 가만히 되니 내가 쓰니 돼요 안 그지 가서 샘니 때문에 수직하는 거예요. 얘는 가만히 정강대 신강이라고 치. 그래서 나한테는 내가 동안에 생각이 너네 이렇게 토라 믿었어. 그래서 이걸 찍는 거 나오니 나도 쳐봐. 내가 쏜 나는 그냥 눈이었어. 근데 Lojong 생인데 배 개체보다 우스등에 하고 썼어.
Really the power of Lojong, of mind training practice is incredible. It is extremely powerful, transformative. So for me, where I really saw this, experienced this directly for myself, the power of a Lojong mind training practice was when I was in prison. I was in prison and received these very teachings on mind training from Patrul Rinpoche. Where before training in Lojong, mind training at all, when I was first put in prison, I truly perceived it, prison, as a hell realm. And then having trained just a little bit in Lojong, in these mind training meditations and practices, my perception completely changed. Where instead of seeing it as a hell realm, it became a retreat center. We were all simply in a retreat. The external environment, the object, the environment itself didn't change at all whatsoever. But my perception of it did through the power of Lojong, of this practice. And then eventually through through Lojong, and in particular through the great kindness of my teacher, of the Lama, then I came to the full realization, the understanding that what we call happiness and well-being really is solely within the mind. Really comes down to it's dependent upon one's mind. And at this point, eventually I came to the experience that prison itself was a pure room, was this pure room, a Buddha field. And at that point, there was this clear understanding, and really it's true for everyone, that what we call happiness and suffering is not dependent upon the external circumstances, is not dependent upon the objects themselves. It's within one's own mind. So this has been my direct personal experience. I had one single external environment, one object, prison, that I had three completely different experiences and perceptions of. So based on my personal experience in that way, then I truly understand and have a clear recognition of the power of Lojong mind training practice.
That's all.
My dues and jet and just say, she never, $1 table something to say, some my dues and jet and dinner, tribute to your mayor. Possibly, Korean, Korean pension, Jedos and the pension, Lang Pie, which I would in that or Yara. Imagine that a pool goes to Timothy to say it. She the one way in the common pool with them between, but Yasa Janatu is Yasa didn't do that the order is my decision and sooner than
공부시한테 드레토 내가 노중선 다단 레와 봤어요.
다단
레와 토바. 레와 토바 쓰는데 얘네 다 zambo부 대화기도 여러 왔어. 야 때문에 가르쳐고 지금 현다가 따쟁아서 배는 봐 조고라고 배는 됐나 얘다 배는 그 장면을 배차는 들어가서 보너들고 나다 배는 되는 담아서 배는 부부터서 야서야 그 경제도 아니면 또 참참야 참참나 그때는 전문에서 배는 대자고 이제 손에 들어가면 왜 그런 게 중요해. 근데 다른 대화 쓰는데 야구 누가 니가는 대화 쓰게 그랬어. 야구 대화대 가정이 장이 야구대 대화래. 그래봐. 도구가 대화대 얘는 말하는 저거 배나 얘네 레냐나 사이야고대 대화래. 그래봐. 배나 얘네 낸들스도 가서 배나다 낸벨 대화세도 가서 되는 말하는 저거 양 배나 미치가 컨트롤한 거이나 야는 미치가 컨트롤한 거이나 아니 나는 니가 되고서 양 맞아 내가 차고요 근데 소도다티 제가 되봐서 무상에 기타 가래는 거랑 가동을 주고 다지 대체적으로 좀 쓰는 거였어 아린이 좀 이렇게 너무 그냥 뭐 또 지금 너무 좀 다리 돼서 못 받는 거.
다리. 세티. 우리 뒤만
눈 들리는 номер로 나는 내가 또 봐서
딱딱 좋아 이렇게.
내가 또 봤대 나 제도에서 나 무슨 얘 내가 생각 안 했어 내가 가리는 거 좀 그랬어
소다 되거든. 최다.
이제 나 제도다
Where's my help? So the question was, within the context of Lojong in other texts, there's another prayer where it says, for the sake of myself and those connected to me. Yeah? So in our current context, when we say, for the sake of myself and those connected to me, how are we to understand what it means, those connected to me? What type of relationship that's referring to? Just good relations, just bad relations? And Rinpoche says, primarily we're talking about those connected to us, currently connected to us in whatever ways there may be, positive connections, negative connections. And with regards to our parents, those connected to us as being our parents, how to understand that connection as just being positive connections. They've bestowed kindness upon us. They've taught us various different things. But parents teach their children some negative things. They can have connections that are negative as well. Like in the West, in America, parents teach you how to go fishing, to go kill fish, go do negative things. So then that connection leads to negative results. So then also when we talk about these connections being just purely negative connections to others, meaning those connections that arise with those we consider enemies. Somebody gets angry at us for something, they're angry towards us, then we retaliate back towards them. Then based on that connection, then both parties, everybody's amassing negative karma. So anyway, that's just the explanation on this one phrase that's in some prayer related to Lojong that says, for the sake of myself and all those connected to me, what exactly it means, all those connected to me. So it can mean positive connections, negative connections, in the mix of both.
Especially within this lifetime.
Particularly within this lifetime.
나는 어찌나 다 노중쇼사 라막 두고 오지 셈쇼. 얘네 다 되게 지금 노중 제사가 사자들은 마 제행게 근데 자나 공간다. 자미 뭐 마쇼 자나. 아 무슨 좀 또 찍찍 거지 말고 좀 한가해도 제가 노중을 사람만 제행해도 이래요. 그래서는 어차피 그 해봤지 돈이 제일 와. 얘네 나는 내가 돈도 지만 다 상봉 해봐 니가 됐는데요. 되니 내가 되니 나게 찍다 그냥 다 되는 대접지로 왔어. 다 상에 니가 돼. 다 뒷념으로 보여. 다 대접도 처음으로 들어쳐.
Which says, like, for me, I train in Lojong for the sake of myself and all those connected to me. When I went through this training, I received it from the master I was connected to, Tulku Rinpoche, receiving the instructions on practice. Then the objects of my practice, those that I was connected to, in particular were all the Chinese invaders that were arriving that had made a connection with me in that lifetime based on their negative motivations and intentions. So in that way, my the sphere of my Lojong mind training practice included those that I was connected to in this lifetime, having both excellent and negative connections to, that had arisen based on both positive and negative causes and conditions. The teacher I received these teachings from, my other friends and companions I was training in, and then the masses of the Chinese that surrounded us and that had invaded to be trained in and recognized as my own mother. So we had all sorts of connections, different types of relationships that served, to fulfill that Lojong practice.
Lato, Yuni, Chanson.
This very moment for the people and nations of this earth, may not even the names disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard, but rather may pure conduct, merit, wealth, and prosperity increase, and may supreme good fortune and well-being always arise. Page 11. Kanga Dritsang Nanga Chigu Buddha Yeshera Bajamne Sazana Jambu Yamne Yame Tete Roche Sho Kiwa Kuntu Yanda Bhavata Mene Chikya Bhavata Sadana Yuyute Hatsa Pande Lambe Kopa Yoto Sho